We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. This is Clint Kelly, Malpractice attorney. 737-7587 is the number if you want to jump in there. Beginning of the show, we touched bases again just briefly on the coronavirus and what that all means. Do you think any, and I know I'm going to have you use your crystal ball here, as time passes, could any cases potentially spawn out of the coronavirus? And I'm going from I know it's new and it's early on, but do you think someone in retrospect, maybe 6 months from now, could look back and say a doctor misdiagnosed them? Is it just so new it's not fair to put someone under that spotlight?
Yeah, well, I would look at it as fairness because, I mean, medicine is, you're supposed to do what you're supposed to do for people, and if you violate the rules, then you should be held accountable. But I don't think that's going to be the problem.
Okay.
I think what the problem is going to be is there are going to be numerous people who go to the hospital who are sick or think they're sick.
Have allergies and think they have it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And they're going to flood the hospital, and so the doctors and the staff are going to spend less time with the patients who have other sicknesses, the patients who have other surgical procedures. They're not going to get as much time and attention that they otherwise would because the population, the volume of patients in the hospitals is going to grow. And so inevitably, the margin of safety is going to shrink, and someone's going to have a medical mistake made simply because the nurse or the doctor shortchanged that patient because they're spending time with other patients.
I didn't think of that. You hear about some of these hospitals in Milan, Italy, where Italy's the epicenter in a lot of for what's happening in Europe, which now seems to be ground zero more than China. And the hospitals there are overrun, not just with people that have coronavirus, but maybe others that are sick. And I didn't think about that. It's like when I go to any hospital here for a story or something like this, the emergency rooms are packed. The triage area, they're sharing rooms. There's people on stretchers in hallways. Okay, they're trying to get good treatment, but it's so crowded. That's before this happened.
Remember I told you that you never want to go to a hospital on a weekend or during a holiday?
Yeah.
It's the same phenomenon. They don't have enough staff, in my opinion, on weekends and holidays to do what they normally do during the week because the patient volume's higher, but the volume of staff is lower. Now you can have a situation, I predict, where the volume's going to be much larger. The staff level may be the same, but you're going to have more patients that are going to have to be cared for by fewer staff.
Can that be taken into account if they make a mistake under those circumstances? And part of their defense argument is, look, the coronavirus, our intake exponentially increased. We had a choice, either try to help these people or turn them away. We took them in, and yes, we made a mistake because so many. Would that be a defense? Because if I'm on a jury and I hear that, I don't know that it would convince me to say you're clear and free, but I would take that into account.
My rebuttal to that would be go hire more staff.
Okay.
I mean, that's the whole idea. I mean,
they're making more money if they have more people in there.
Well, that, and plus, if I'm a patient there, I'm counting on the doctor and the nurses to give me the standard of care I deserve. I'm paying for this.
That's
Nick.
right. That's right.
And so, if the hospital wants to take more patients, needs to take more patients, then you go hire more staff to care for those patients until the volume settles down to a level that's reasonable. But to say I'm going to sacrifice this patient because I got to take care of this patient. The patient who sacrificed doesn't want that.
No.
And they're still paying for the same
service.
Paying.
That's the key. They're paying.
What I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I just don't know if you've heard an argument like that in the past. They haven't tried it. That wouldn't work, would it?
No. Well, I don't say it wouldn't work. You never know. Somebody may argue something, particularly if it's a punitive damages case. But I don't think it's a fair argument because the patients are paying the same amount of money and they deserve to get the same amount of care. And the provider has the capabilities, the financial muscle, to go bring in more staff to take care of these patients. If they're going to bring in more coronavirus patients. But from a practical standpoint, my concern is they won't hire a lot more staff, and therefore the amount of care, the amount of attention to the other patients is going to shrink.
Yep.
I hope it doesn't happen. I hope I'm wrong. Been wrong before, but that's the concern I have.
All right, I want to lay it out, and again, we may not get as many calls today because folks, frankly, are still recovering from the tornado. And 737-7587. But what cases have you seen, or what should we put out there right now that is I don't know if anything's trending. I sometimes ask you along those lines. Most of the time, it's much of the same. The back, surgeries, some of the things with medicines. What do you think? What have you seen of late?
Well, in fact, I brought this article, and one thing that I believe we are going to see, and it's a little bit attendant to the conversation we talked about earlier with staff and staff levels, cases out of urgent care clinics.
Okay.
Insurance is driving people to urgent care because they cover virtually the entire bill. So there's a financial incentive for patients to go there versus going to the hospital emergency room. And in many cases, it's the proper allocation of resources. You don't want to go to the emergency room if an urgent care can take care of a flu.
Right. I've done that.
Even a broken bone.
It's usually closer by. It's usually in a strip mall next to the Kroger or something, and you can go on in, and it works for me.
Exactly. But that brings to bear the question, what is the quality of the staff in these urgent care centers? Are they competent to provide the service that they're providing? And do they refer patients to emergency rooms who need to go?
Okay.
Because there are people who go to urgent care thinking that this is something urgent care can take care of. The urgent care clinic looks at it, and instead of referring a patient to the emergency room because it's out of their control, classic example, somebody goes into an urgent care center with chest pain, run an EKG, the patient has unstable angina. Now, an urgent care clinic, there's only so much they can provide for a patient like that. That patient's going to need a cardiologist and ASAP, okay? What's the first thing the urgent care clinic should do? Get that patient to the emergency room immediately.
So you got to go.
Yes, put them in an ambulance and get them there immediately, get them to the cardiologist, make sure they're taken care of. But what happens if the urgent care clinic either A, misdiagnoses it, and says, well, it's really not a heart attack, it's just indigestion, or they think they can handle it right there, give them nitroglycerin, see if it gets resolved, and then send them home and say, follow up with your doctor the next day or the next 2 days, and then the person dies on the way home. I mean, those are the types of things that we may start seeing if urgent care clinics are not staffed with the appropriate people who are willing to make the referrals to emergency rooms.
So you're bringing this up to me, and I've told you I've been to urgent care clinics. So you're going to ask me as a patient, what do I think I'm getting at an urgent care clinic? I think I'm getting basically the same thing I would get at a hospital, except it's not the doctor I'm familiar with who I know, if it's my own doctor, or an emergency room. But I expect there to be qualified nurses, and I expect there to be at least 1 or 2 physicians there who can see me before they pass me on to the nurse. Is that not a fair assumption?
Of course it is. I mean, Nick, my wife goes to them when she gets sick, and she gets good care, good attention, and
so
everything
what are we getting
works out.
instead in some cases?
In some cases, these clinics are not staffed with the proper people, competent people who know what they're doing, who know to recognize a life-threatening condition and send these patients to a hospital. That's what's happening. That's the cases I'm seeing.
Really?
And it's becoming a trend because more patients are going to urgent care clinics.
So are we talking about doctors then that have had problems, or are we talking about, when you say not properly staffed, what are they staffed with?
Nurse practitioners who don't recognize what they're dealing with.
Okay, so they're not qualified to be in that position.
Or they're just not trained properly to recognize a life-threatening condition when it's right there in front of their face. I mean, you understand? You asked me, what am I seeing? That's what I'm saying.
No, I know, and it's disturbing because these days an awful lot of people use that. One reason is because it's cheaper to maybe go there as opposed to going to an emergency.
Too, Nick. I mean, a lot of times you get better care. I mean, I've been there myself.
Sometimes,
So, I mean, I'm not telling people don't go. You should go to an urgent care clinic. I'm just saying that if you suspect you are having a life-threatening condition, that's a situation where you need to go to the emergency room and just be knowledgeable about who's staffing the urgent care clinic. It doesn't hurt to go look and see who's on the staff directory. Many urgent care clinics have a medical doctor who's in charge of the facility.
Right.
Thumbs up. But there are some, particularly in other states, that don't have that requirement.
So all they have are nurses?
Correct. They don't have anybody to answer to. Nurse practitioners here, I don't know if we talked about this last show. You know, there's legislation that is pending, or at least is being studied, as to whether nurse practitioners should be given more freedom. Basically, as I understand the legislation, if you take the extreme view, they won't have to answer to doctors anymore. They won't have to report within 24 hours. They'll be given great latitude to make decisions, and they won't have to have those decisions supervised by medical doctors except
who's advocating for that law change?
Nurse practitioners.
The nurses want that.
Yeah.
But isn't that going to put a lot more pressure on them? Because if they don't have the knowledge and they screw up, they're going to get sued.
Well, think about it. They can charge more. Because they can do more on their own. They can be more independent. They can open clinics on their own, and they can run them without having to have a medical doctor. And if you want to open up a clinic, it's a lot cheaper to run that clinic when you don't have to answer to a medical doctor and pay that medical doctor to be on staff. You see what I mean?
So when you go to one of these urgent care clinics, find out if there's a medical doctor on staff.
And there probably is.
But just ask.
Yeah, just ask.
That's the good stuff I
and
get
I haven't
from
seen
you.
this, and I haven't seen this here in Nashville. I'm just,
Okay,
just thinking.
but it's a trend.
It's a trend that's been happening across it. Because see, we're sort of new to this. This has been embedded in California and out west for a long time. We're just starting to see the proliferation of urgent care here being used for a lot of different things. This has been going on for a long time in the West.
Gotcha. All right, we've got Charles, Carl, Bob, and others. Let's get to some calls before we take to our first break, and we'll go to Charles. Charles, good morning. Hi, Charles.
I was going to a psychiatrist who wasn't seeing me enough and not prescribing the right amounts of medication. Therefore, I went to the mental hospital. Do I have a malpractice claim against Hall? And while in the mental hospital, the staff was calling me by my full name instead of just my full name for confidentiality purposes. Does that violate the HIPAA law? Do I have a malpractice claim against the hospital?
Nick, I had no idea. That's just too
on the
little
HIPAA
information.
thing.
The HIPAA, well, look, when you're dealing with psychiatric patients, it's a tough situation because there are all kinds of accommodations that have to be made for people like that. There also may be someone who's responsible for Charles, meaning that there is someone who helps make medical decisions for him. And so the question is the hospital empowered to notify one of his representatives? Those are tough cases. I tend to stay away from those.
I was going to ask you, and that may be by itself obviously a tough case. Have you taken on cases involving psychiatric treatments? I mean, most of the time when you and I talk, it has to do with something physical. Okay, they messed up a surgery or a back's messed up. I wonder, do you sometimes see cases where maybe someone's misdiagnosed or given the wrong meds that could then lead to, say, a mental breakdown or something?
Sure. The last malpractice case I took involving basically psychiatric malpractice was when a mental facility, I won't mention the name because it was a settlement ultimately, but a mental facility discharged a young man who should never have been discharged.
Okay.
He went home and chopped his sister's head off.
Oh gosh.
That was a case that not only was worth taking, it needed to be taken because the care was ridiculous.
And it was blatant that this guy never should have been released.
That's different. These types of cases, like what Charles is talking about, I found are extremely difficult to take, and that's why I tend to stay away from them.
Gotcha. Let's go next to Carl. Carl, good morning. Hi, Carl.
Hi. How you doing this morning?
Good. Go ahead, sir. What can we do for you?
Well, I was going to ask him a question. You know, I was involved in a class action lawsuit there last year, but I didn't settle with the people because it actually, the way I read the paperwork stuff, if you agreed to terms, you couldn't pursue the matter anymore because there was actually more side effects to the medicine than what they were doing on the procedures. I know for a fact I took the medicine, then shortly after that I developed seizures from taking the medicine. I've talked to several other people, and they said the same thing. I asked them, I tell them, I said, let me guess what kind of medicine you take. Cipro, Lipiquin. They said, how'd you know?
Yeah. That's an interesting point he's made. It's not just class actions, it's mass torts, which I suspect may be what he's talking about.
Are you still pursuing it legally, or where do you stand right now if you didn't settle?
Well, I'm standing down in limbo, but, you know, I actually talked to the pharmaceutical company and asked them about it, and they said, well, ain't much we can do about it. And I said, well, I guess I'll just disclose my information to the news media or whatever. And they said, well, you signed a disclosure. I said, no, I didn't agree to your terms. I didn't sign anything. I signed no. So that's what question I want to know. Do I have a legal right to turn it over to the news media and let them investigate it?
Well, Carl, do you have a lawyer? Did a lawyer represent you in this?
No, I don't.
Okay. He's going to need a legal opinion on this from someone who handles these cases. I don't know. Did you say it was Levaquin? Was that the drug you're taking?
You're correct. And I talked to several other when I was pursuing this matter, so I pulled all the medical records myself, and I can't say a whole lot because somebody will know who I am talking, but I'm a pretty smart man. I pulled all the legal documents, all the drugstore records and whatnot. I've got everything to back everything up.
Well, you were smart enough not to sign documentation till you knew exactly what your rights were and to make sure that you had read and known everything that you could know. And I tell people that, and I continue to tell people that don't sign anything until you've talked to a lawyer and you understand what your rights are and know what you're doing. So I'm glad he did that. I understand Levaquin litigation insofar as I know there are lawyers that handle this. They're specialists. You can find them on the internet. They're all over the place. That's what
of course, all they were doing before was for neuropathy, what it caused.
Right.
But nobody was pursuing the aspect that did cause seizures. And it's most definitely because I got my drugstore records, and I don't know, about 8 months later or less, developed seizures. And it's pretty logical because they don't run in the family, and typically if they run in the family, they never had one before in life.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a medical malpractice case. It's a product liability case that he's talking about. He's talking about where there's a defect in the drug that leads to this side effect of seizures, that causes seizures. That's a different area of law than what I practice. I've had some cases, defective drug cases, but right now I'm not handling those cases. So he needs to talk to a Levaquin lawyer.
A Levaquin lawyer. It sounds to me if he Googles it, he may be able to find something.
He will. There's a bunch of them.
And if you've pulled all that documentation, go for it.
Yeah.
You know, go after him in the court of law. Listen, we'll take a break on that note when we come back. More calls, more of our conversation with malpractice attorney Clint Kelly right after this. Stay with us.